removed from being able to put the ball on the floor. Tim Duncan was the same way, you know, I mean.
Alonzo Mourning was born in February 1970 inches, Chesapeake, Virginia. From a young age, structure and discipline were part of his daily life. He grew up in a strict household where effort mattered more than talent. That mindset shaped the player he would become. At Georgetown University under Coach John Thompson, Mourning learned the foundations of defense, teamwork, and mental toughness. He was never the flashiest star, but his focus and consistency made him stand out. When he entered the NBA in 1992 with the Charlotte Hornets, it did not take long for everyone to notice his presence. His body was built like granite, and his energy on defense was relentless. Every block, every rebound, every roar after a key stop became a trademark of his game. By the time he joined the Miami Heat, he had evolved into the heart of their identity. In an era full of legends like Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Patrick Ewing, Mourning earned respect by never backing down. What defined him most was not just skill, but attitude. He treated every possession as a battle, every opponent as a test of his preparation. Even when illness tried to take basketball away from him, he came back stronger, turning personal struggle into public inspiration. For him, greatness was about responsibility, not attention. Mourning's journey is the story of a man who never quit, who turned pain into power, and who set a standard for professionalism that still inspires young players today. And now, at 55, he looks back on the game that shaped him and honors the 5 players who earned his deepest respect. Alonzo Mourning was born in February, 1970 inches, Chesapeake, Virginia. From a young age, structure and discipline were part of his daily life. He grew up in a strict household where effort mattered more than talent. That mindset shaped the player he would become. At Georgetown University under Coach John Thompson, Mourning learned the foundations of defense, teamwork, and mental toughness. He was never the flashiest star, but his focus and consistency made him stand out. When he entered the NBA in 1992 with the Charlotte Hornets, it did not take long for everyone to notice his presence. His body was built like granite, and his energy on defense was relentless. Every block, every rebound, every roar after a key stop became a trademark of his game. By the time he joined the Miami Heat, he had evolved into the heart of their identity. In an era full of legends like Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Patrick Ewing, Mourning earned respect by never backing down. What defined him most was not just skill but attitude. He treated every possession as a battle, every opponent as a test of his preparation. Even when illness tried to take basketball away from him, he came back stronger, turning personal struggle into public inspiration. For him, greatness was about responsibility, not attention. Mourning's journey is the story of a man who never quit, who turned pain into power, and who set a standard for professionalism that still inspires young players today. And now, at 55, he looks back on the game that shaped him and honors the 5 players who earned his deepest respect. Number 5. Patrick Ewing. Before Alonzo Mourning became a dominant force in the NBA, there was Patrick Ewing. For Mourning, Ewing was more than a rival. He was a mentor, a role model, and a symbol of what it meant to carry the weight of expectation with pride. Both men came from the same foundation at Georgetown University under the demanding eye of Coach John Thompson. That connection created a bond that would shape Mourning's mentality for years to come. When Mourning arrived at Georgetown, Ewing had already left his mark as one of the most dominant college players in history. The stories of his work ethic, his humility, and his competitive fire were legendary around the campus. Young Alonzo listened and learned. He watched game tapes of Ewing, studied his footwork, and absorbed every lesson about positioning and discipline. It was clear to him that success came from repetition and respect for the game. When they finally met as opponents in the NBA, their relationship transformed. Ewing was leading the New York Knicks while Mourning carried the Miami Heat, 2 teams that hated losing to each other. Every time they faced off, the battles were physical and emotional. They would fight for every rebound, every inch of space near the rim. Yet when the final buzzer sounded, they always shook hands. There was no trash talk, no arrogance, only mutual respect. In the late 1990 seconds, their playoff matchups became some of the most intense moments in basketball. The Heat and Knicks series were wars of attrition defined by defense, pride, and endurance. Mourning never forgot how Ewing carried himself during those games. Even when Ewing's body began to fade, he never complained. He played through pain and pressure with a sense of calm that Mourning deeply admired. Off the court, Ewing also showed Mourning what professionalism looked like. He never chased attention. He never disrespected his teammates. He let his preparation speak for him. That silent example left a lasting mark on Mourning. When younger players later looked up to him, he would repeat the same lessons Ewing had once embodied. In interviews, Mourning often mentioned that Ewing's influence went beyond basketball. It was about character, about how a man handles responsibility when millions are watching. To Mourning, Patrick Ewing was the gold standard for accountability, the first blueprint of how a center should lead. So, when Alonzo Mourning thinks about the men he respects the most, Patrick Ewing naturally begins the list. He represents the foundation, the discipline, and the quiet power that shaped Mourning's identity. Every block and every roar that defined Mourning's career began with the lessons he learned from watching Ewing. To him, that respect was never about friendship or rivalry. It was about gratitude toward the man who showed him what greatness truly looks like. Number 4. Shaquille O'Neal. When Alonzo Mourning talks about power in basketball, one name always comes up first: Shaquille O'Neal. From the moment they entered the league in the same year, 1992, the comparisons began. Both were dominant big men, both came from strong college programs, and both believed in setting the tone inside the paint. Yet while Shaq was the entertainer who brought humor and charisma to the game, Mourning was the quiet soldier who relied on intensity and precision. The contrast made every battle between them unforgettable. During their early years, Mourning played for the Charlotte Hornets, while Shaq was transforming the Orlando Magic into a new powerhouse. Whenever they met, fans could feel the collision before the ball even went up for the tip. It was strength against strength, two giants testing who could control the paint longer. Shaq's raw power was unmatched, but Mourning refused to be intimidated. He studied film focused on leverage and used timing instead of size to fight back. When Mourning moved to the Miami Heat, their rivalry reached its peak. The Heat and Magic represented two rising forces in the Eastern Conference. Each time they faced each other, the game turned into a statement of pride. Mourning respected Shaq not just for his dominance, but for his consistency. No matter how many defenders teams threw at him, Shaq kept producing. To Mourning, that was a rare kind of greatness, the ability to handle pressure and still deliver when everyone expected you to. Their duels were not only physical but mental. Shaq's playful personality often clashed with Mourning's intense seriousness, yet underneath the surface there was deep admiration. Mourning once said that facing Shaq forced him to become a better player because no other opponent demanded that level of preparation. Each encounter felt like a test of manhood, and neither player wanted to give an inch. Years later, fate brought them together as teammates in Miami. By then, Shaq was the veteran superstar, and Mourning had returned after overcoming his kidney illness. Instead of rivals, they became brothers in pursuit of a championship. Mourning accepted a smaller role focused on defense and leadership, while Shaq carried the offense. That season, in 2006, they won the NBA title together. For Mourning, it was more than a trophy. It was proof that respect can grow from rivalry. After retirement, both men continued to praise each other publicly. Shaq often called Mourning one of the toughest competitors he ever faced. Mourning, in turn, credited Shaq for teaching him what dominance truly looks like when matched with discipline and self-belief. When Alonzo Mourning lists the 5 players he respected the most, Shaquille O'Neal stands as a reminder that competition can build admiration. Behind the battles, the fouls, and the sweat, there was always mutual recognition between two warriors who pushed each other to the limit. To Mourning, Shaq symbolized pure power guided by purpose, the kind of strength that demands not just attention, but respect. Number 3. Hakeem Olajuwon. For Alonzo Mourning, Hakeem Olajuwon represented something more than dominance. He was the bridge between physical strength and graceful intelligence. Every time Mourning faced the Houston Rockets, he knew it was going to be a masterclass in basketball art. Hakeem was never just a center. He was a craftsman who turned every move into a lesson. His spins, his footwork, his soft touch near the rim seemed effortless, yet Mourning understood how much discipline it took to make it look that way. When Mourning entered the league, Olajuwon was already an MVP, a finals champion, and a symbol of perfection in post play. Many young centers tried to overpower him and failed. Mourning studied his game carefully, realizing that power alone could not win against precision. What impressed him most was the way Hakeem controlled rhythm. He could slow the game down, then explode in one motion, leaving defenders guessing every time. Their first meetings were like student versus professor. Mourning came in ready to challenge, but always left humbled. Hakeem's footwork confused even the best defenders, and his timing on defense was unmatched. In one game during the mid-90s, Mourning thought he had a clean drive to the rim. In an instant, Hakeem appeared, blocked the shot, and smiled. That small gesture said everything about who he was. He competed with joy and respect, never needing words to prove his mastery. Over time, Mourning began to apply what he learned from watching Olajuwon. He practiced patience in the post-studied spacing and improved his anticipation. Those lessons transformed him from a raw athlete into a complete defender. Mourning often said that Hakeem made every big man in the league better just by existing. You could not prepare for him. You could only learn from him. What Mourning admired most was how Hakeem combined spirituality with competition. He played with calmness, never showing frustration, never losing focus. Mourning saw in him a reflection of the discipline that he valued. When Hakeem won his second championship, Mourning was among the first to publicly congratulate him. There was no jealousy, only acknowledgement that greatness had been achieved the right way. Years later, when Mourning looked back on his toughest opponents, he placed Hakeem near the top, not because of numbers, but because of inspiration. He viewed Olajuwon as the perfect example of how intelligence could elevate talent. Hakeem reminded him that greatness is not just about dominating opponents, but mastering oneself. To Alonzo Mourning, Hakeem Olajuwon was the standard of excellence. Every battle against him felt like a test of patience, humility, and skill. He forced Mourning to think, to adapt, to evolve. And in that process, respect grew deeper than rivalry. For Mourning, the dream was not just an opponent. He was a teacher who shaped how an entire generation of centers understood the game. Number 2. Dikembe Mutombo. Among all the men Alonzo Mourning battled in his career, none shared a bond as deep as Dikembe Mutombo. They were more than rivals. They were brothers, shaped by the same roots, the same coach, and the same values. Both came from Georgetown University, where John Thompson built not just basketball players, but men of character. From the moment they met, Mourning and Mutombo recognized something familiar in each other, the mix of toughness and humility that defined the Georgetown big man tradition. When they faced off in the NBA, the competition was fierce. Mourning wore the colors of the Miami Heat, while Mutombo protected the rim for the Denver Nuggets, later the Atlanta Hawks. Every time they met, the battle, inside the paint, was a war of willpower. Both players prided themselves on defense, shot blocking, and physical play. The games were hard-fought, full of contact and emotion, but never disrespectful. They could collide 10 times under the rim and still smile at each other when the whistle blew. What made their relationship special was that it extended far beyond the court. Both men came from families that valued discipline, education, and faith. Both believed that basketball was more than sport. It was a platform to represent where they came from and what they believed in. Mutombo often spoke about using his success to give back to Africa, building hospitals, and supporting communities. Mourning shared that same sense of responsibility, creating foundations to help children and families in need. Their friendship grew stronger because they admired each other not only as players but as men. When Mourning faced his health crisis, it was Mutombo who stood beside him. During the time Mourning was diagnosed with kidney disease, Mutombo helped him connect with doctors and offered emotional support. That gesture left a mark on Mourning's heart. He later said that in his darkest moment, Mutombo showed what true brotherhood means. It was no longer about who blocked more shots or who had more rebounds. It was about compassion, loyalty, and respect. Even when they faced each other later in their careers, their competitive fire never faded. They still challenged every shot, still refused to back down. Yet the rivalry was always grounded in friendship. When one succeeded, the other celebrated. When one struggled, the other reached out. Their relationship became a symbol of what basketball can create, a connection built through sweat, struggle, and shared purpose. To Mourning Dikembe, Mutombo embodied integrity. He was proof that you could be powerful without arrogance, fierce without hate, and humble without weakness. Their battles may have ended years ago, but the bond between them remains strong. Mourning often calls him my brother when speaking publicly, a title that carries more meaning than any statistic or trophy. When Alonzo Mourning looks back on his journey, he sees Mutombo not just as an opponent, but as a reflection of himself. Both men fought through adversity, both stood for something greater than the game, and that is why Dikembe Mutombo ranks so high on Mourning's list of respected players, a man whose strength came not only from his body, but from his heart. Number 1. Tim Duncan. For Alonzo Mourning, respect has never been about noise or headlines. It has always been about consistency, humility, and the ability to let actions speak. That is why at the top of his list stands Tim Duncan. Known as the Big Fundamental Duncan, represented everything Mourning admired in an athlete. He was calm, disciplined, and relentlessly focused. In a league full of personalities and drama, Duncan stood apart as a man who cared only about winning the right way. When Mourning faced Duncan on the court, it was like watching two philosophies of basketball meet. Mourning played with emotion and intensity, his fire visible in every movement. Duncan was the opposite, quiet and methodical, rarely showing his feelings, but always in control. Yet beneath those differences, Mourning saw something familiar, the same dedication to craft, the same respect for the game. Each battle between the Miami Heat and the San Antonio Spurs was a lesson in composure versus passion. And every time, Mourning walked away with more respect for the man who never lost his cool. During the early 2000s, Duncan dominated the league. He was already an MVP, leading the Spurs to multiple championships. For most players, that level of success might bring arrogance, but not for Duncan. Mourning often said that what impressed him most was how Tim treated everyone equally, from superstars to rookies. He never raised his voice. He never sought attention. He simply worked. That quiet professionalism reminded Mourning of what true leadership looked like. In one memorable matchup, Mourning recalled how Duncan outsmarted double teams, not with speed, but with patience. He waited, analyzed, and struck at the perfect moment. Mourning could not help but appreciate the mental side of that game. To him, Duncan was not just a skilled player, but a thinker who elevated basketball into an art of balance and timing. When Mourning returned to the Heat after his health battle, Duncan was among the first opponents to congratulate him. It was a small gesture, but it revealed the man behind the greatness. Mourning never forgot it. That moment showed that Duncan's respect for the game extended to the people who fought for it. For Mourning, that meant more than any highlight or stat sheet. As the years passed, both men entered the Hall of Fame, their careers defined by discipline and excellence. Mourning often mentions Duncan when talking to young players, describing him as the model of how greatness should look quiet but unshakable. He believes Duncan's style of leadership is rare, built not on words but on daily example. At number 1, Tim Duncan represents everything Alonzo Mourning values most. The balance of strength and humility, the pursuit of perfection without ego, and the silent confidence of a man who let his work speak for him. When Mourning lists the players he respected the most, Duncan is not just first because of his trophies. He is first because he reminded everyone that true greatness never needs to shout. Looking back on his journey, Alonzo Mourning's list of respected players tells the story of his own values. Patrick Ewing, the mentor who taught him professionalism. Shaquille O'Neal, the rival who showed him what raw dominance looked like. Hakeem Olajuwon, the teacher of balance and intelligence. Dikembe Mutombo, the brother who shared his purpose. And Tim Duncan, the quiet perfectionist who proved that greatness requires no noise. Each of these men reflected a part of Mourning himself, a man built on discipline, loyalty, and strength. To Mourning, respect is not earned through fame or highlights. It comes from how a player approaches the game, how he treats his teammates, and how he carries himself when the lights fade. The league has seen many stars come and go, but few have left a mark as deep as those 5. They defined an era where defense mattered, where hard work was a badge of honor, and where words meant less than actions. Mourning's legacy stands beside them, carved in the same stone of integrity and determination. His career was proof that heart and discipline can overcome pain and adversity. When fans remember him, they do not just recall his blocks or dunks. They remember the fire in his eyes and the respect he earned from every opponent who dared to challenge him. For Alonzo Mourning, basketball was never about ego. It was about purpose, pride, and the power of respect. And as he looks back at the men who shaped his career, one truth remains clear. Back then, basketball was more than a game. It was a test of character. Who would make your list of the most respected NBA players?